Good day, everyone. Welcome to another week, and we have here Chapter 6. We're just moving on here, trying to finish up to where we need to be at the end of the quarter. Chapter 6 introduces adjectives, and you'll see in the textbook or here, adjectives are the first and second declensions. The adjectives that we're looking at, you have to know the first and second declension forms that we've been learning in chapters 4 and 5 to do this. So if you don't know those forms really well, go back and learn those, have them memorized, know exactly what they do, what the cases do. You will need all of that information for these adjectives. If you remember back to the discussion of the definite article in chapter 5, and how, yes, the word the has 24 forms in Greek, each of these adjectives is going to have potentially 24 forms. We'll get more into that, but yeah, you'll want to be very familiar with all of your first and second declension forms here. So let's get into this. First of all, what is an adjective? What exactly does that mean? At its most basic, an adjective is a descriptive word. It describes a noun or any other substantive, really. In Greek, adjectives follow the same kind of declension patterns that nouns do. You have in this chapter, we'll be covering first and second declensions. There are also third declension nouns that we will learn in the next quarter. Chapter 17 deals with third declension nouns, and there are also third declension adjectives. So, yeah, they follow the same kind of patterns of forms and form changes that the nouns do. Most of your adjectives, actually just about all of them, are what we call three termination adjectives, and you'll see that term used in the book. I don't actually care if you know it, but it's probably good, just to define it here, because the textbook uses it. Three termination means that there are separate forms for each of the three genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. And so when you see them in like the vocabulary list, you'll see the adjectives listed with three forms. It'll have one form and then a comma, then another form, and then a comma, and the third form. Okay, and that just means those are the masculine, feminine, and neuter forms, therefore three termination. Okay. A few of these adjectives, and it's a small group, and they pretty much fall all into one category, but they're what we call two termination adjectives, which means that the masculine and feminine forms look the same. There's a single form for both the masculine and the feminine. The only other separate one is the separate neuter forms, and like your second declension nouns, those neuter forms are going to look very similar to the masculine/feminine form in this. All right, so those two termination adjectives, they can be easier in some ways because, yeah, you don't have to memorize 24 forms, right? You only have to memorize, 16 forms, because there is no separate feminine. So it can be easier to memorize the forms, but it can be a bit more complicated when you're translating, because you don't know from the form of that adjective whether it is masculine or feminine. You have to pick up from cues elsewhere. But there are plenty of cues that can help you. Okay, adjectives are always used with nouns, and so you can look at the noun that is with this adjective and tell whether it's masculine or feminine. Probably the best way to tell is to look at the definite article, if there is one. Okay, and the definite article has separate masculine and feminine forms, and so that will also tell you whether that particular adjective is masculine or feminine if this is a two-termination adjective. Now, when we get into the forms of these, you will recognize this probably very quickly. It is like the definite article chart, in that you have the masculine and the neuter will both be following the second declension. The neuter will have this kind of standard variation off of the masculine, but a lot of the forms are identical, and the ones that are not are very easy to follow. The feminine forms will be the different ones, and those will follow the first declension. This is, of course, in the 3 termination adjectives, the ones with a separate feminine. Okay, and so that is how this will work. If you want to go back and look at the definite article and how those forms work, the adjectives will be very similar. All right, so let's get into this now. There are a couple of subheadings with this. You'll notice this one is called the epsilon iota row type. If you'll remember from chapter 5, that is a kind of separate subtype of the first declension. And we need to do that because, again, the feminine forms follow the first declension. The only time that this subtype, the epsilon iota row subtype, comes into play is in the feminine forms and only with the singular. All right. Every other form, it doesn't matter. It's a totally standard chart. All right. The only time you will need to know what sort of subtype these come into is with the feminine singular. All right. And the way you do that is, like everything else, you take the ending off of the nominative singular, and what you're left with is what we call the adjective stem. You look at the last letter of that adjective stem, and that will tell you what type of adjective this is. All right, and this one happens to be in this epsilon iota row type because if you take the ending off of the nominative singular, you will see that the final letter of the stem is a row. All right, and so therefore it falls into this category. Again, that only comes into play in the feminine singular, and so when we get to those forms, I will draw your attention to why that's important. But if you remember the first declension, it's exactly the same thing, okay, as there. You're going to have the theme vowel alpha, okay, basically. But let's look at the masculine forms first, and you have nominative singular masculine, mikros. The ending is exactly the same as masculine words of the second declension. Okay, mikros, mikru, then genitive singular, mikro, dative singular with an iota subscript, and mikron, the accusative. Okay, again, if you know your second declension, these forms are going to be super easy, right? Plurals, masculine nominative is mikroi. And genitive, mikron. Genitive plural is always, always, always omega nu. Mikrois is your dative plural, and mikrus is your accusative plural. All right, I'm skipping the feminine for now because we'll go to the neuters. That is also a second declension, and so let's look at that. Very similar to the masculine forms. First of all, the neuter nominative singular is mikron, omicron nu. And if you know the nominative singular in a neuter, you always know the accusative, right? And so if nominative singular is mikron, the accusative singular is also mikron. Okay? And then the two middle forms, genitive and dative, the endings are the same as the masculine. So you have mikru and mikro with an iota subscript. Going down to the plurals of the neuter, you have mikra as your nominative plural. If you have the nominative plural, you also know the accusative plural. It's identical. And going to the genitive and the dative, they're the same as the masculine. So you have mikron as the genitive plural and mikrois as the dative plural. All right, now let's go to the feminine. These are the ones that follow the first declension. And so this is the only place where that row at the end of the stem will become important. Throughout the singulars in this type, you're going to have alphas. Okay, that's going to be your theme vowel. So you have mikra with the alpha in the nominative singular. Then genitive singular, mikros, also with the alpha. Dative singular is mikra, alpha with an iota subscript. And accusative singular, mikron, alpha nu. In the plurals, these are your standard plural endings for the first declension. All right, the plural endings will not change for the feminine. Mikrai, nominative plural. Mikron, genitive plural. Again, always omega nu. Dative plural, mikrais. And accusative plural, mikros. All right, that is your first subtype of these adjectives, the epsilon iota row type. Again, the only time that comes into play is the feminine singular. Now let's look at the next set of adjectives. The book calls this the consonant type. All right, a bit of a weird thing to call it because really in this first subtype here, row is a consonant, but they call this consonant type. Really, it's if the end of the stem is anything other than epsilon, iota, or rho. Okay, and again with this one, the only variation is going to come in the feminine singular. So really quickly, I won't go through all of the forms here. The masculine singular, the endings, os, u, o, on. Okay, just like before, just like the previous adjectives, just like the second declension. Plurals, oi, on, ois, and us. This adjective, by the way, means good, agathos, and the previous one, mikros, this one means small. Okay, that's what the definitions of these are. Let's skip over the feminines again, go to the neuters. Okay, and this one, same thing, nominative singular, agathon. Therefore, the accusative singular has the same ending. Okay, on. Then your two genitive and dative are the same as the masculine. Plurals, agatha, and accusative plural, agatha. And the two middle ones are the same as the masculine. Okay. Yeah, the name Agatha, like the author Agatha Christie, okay, this name, it comes from this word, okay, meaning good. Then let's go to the feminine now. The feminine singular is where the variation happens, and so wherever you had an alpha in the feminine singular, you will have etas going throughout this one. The eta is the theme vowel here, so nominative singular agathe, genitive singular agathes, then dative singular agathe, pronounced exactly the same as the nominative singular, but with the iota subscript, and then the accusative singular agathane. In the plurals, you have the exact same endings as the previous one in the feminine. Okay, plural endings don't change. I, own, ice, and os. So those are your two forms or your two types of the three termination adjectives. Okay, both of those, mikros, mikra, mikron, and agathos, agathe, agathon, are both three termination adjectives because you notice they have separate forms for masculine, feminine, and neuter. All right, in the dictionary, in your vocabulary list, they will be listed in that order. Okay, masculine, feminine, and neuter, all in the nominative singular form. That's how these three termination adjectives are listed in a dictionary. Now let's go to the next one. This is a two termination adjective now. Again, in this one, the masculine and feminine forms are the same, so they will have their own joined column there, masculine and feminine, but the endings are the same as the masculine in the three termination. Okay, so these are not difficult at all to learn. This word adunatos, it comes from the word dunatos, which means able or powerful. Okay, and this one, adunatos, that alpha on the beginning there, is just a standard prefix, which means not. If you think about, in English, a word like typical, and then you have a word atypical, that simply means not typical. All right, atypical is something that is an exception or is not typical. So that's where this comes from. Okay, it's this Greek prefix that means not. And so this word here, adunatos, dunatos means able or powerful. Adunatos means impossible. All right, so in the masculine slash feminine, your endings os, u, o, on, plurals oi, on, ois, and us. And then in the neuters, again, nominative and accusative forms are the same. Genitive and dative forms look the same as the masculine slash feminine. All right, now how do we use these? Okay, go over those forms, go over them several times so you have them down, but really, again, these endings should be pretty familiar, and you should have, that kind of pattern of nominative, genitive, dative, accusative down pretty well. The endings are not going to be anything that you haven't seen before. Okay, so how do we use these now? The majority of this chapter is actually on using these adjectives. Now, there is a major rule, and it's exactly the same as the rule with the definite article. When you have an adjective being used, the adjective will typically be used in conjunction with a noun. Okay, we can call the noun the head noun. And the head noun, whatever the gender, number, and case of that head noun is, the adjective must agree in all three of those categories. All right, you will not have an adjective that is in agreement with a noun that does not share does not identical in those three categories: okay, gender, number, and case. If you do have an adjective and there is a noun there in the sentence, but the adjective does not match up in gender, number, and case, that means the adjective is doing something other than describing that noun. Okay, the adjective is being used maybe with another word, with another noun, or it's a special case use of the adjective that we'll be getting to later. All right, but again, if an adjective is describing a noun, it must agree in gender, number, and case. All right, so let's look at some examples of this agreement. The first phrase there, ha agathos anthropos. Okay, easy stuff, right? The endings all match up. All of these, of course, are masculine singular nominative. Okay, gender, number, and case. Therefore, these are all together. Okay, that definite article with the adjective with the noun. That is a full adjective phrase. Look at the next one there, te mikra ecclesia. All right, what's going on here? Those endings don't exactly match up. Well, they don't. The endings don't match up, but all of them are dative singular feminine. All right, the adjective and the noun both have alphas because they fall into that epsilon iota rho category. Notice mikra ends in a rho, and ecclesia, the stem, ends in an iota. Okay, therefore, they have alphas going throughout the singular, and these are all singular forms. The definite article there, te, that just is the dative singular feminine form of the definite article. Okay, it does not end in an epsilon, iota, or rho, so therefore it has an eta there in place of that alpha. But they all have iota subscripts. It's not difficult to identify that these are all dative singular feminines. This next one here, notice the endings do not all match up, but hadus is one of those weird second declension feminine nouns. Okay, and so it's second declension, therefore it gets the second declension endings, but everything else must agree in gender, number, case. So, yeah, tas, agathos, hadus, these are all accusative plural feminine forms. Okay, accusative plural feminine of the article, then of that adjective, and then the noun. The next one, ta agathon doron. All right, again, endings don't match up, but ta is the form of the definite article. Okay, a slight variation from the noun and adjective endings there, but everything else, yeah. This could be either nominative or accusative because it is neuter. Therefore, those forms are the same, but everything is singular and everything is neuter. This last one here, I just put on there because this is a really obnoxious example. Okay, notice that none of these endings match up. Okay, he adunatas marturia. Marturia is your head noun. This is a nominative singular feminine form. The he is the nominative singular feminine of the definite article, and adunatas looks the way it does because it is the two-termination adjective, and the masculine and feminine forms are the same. Therefore, even though, yeah, this doesn't look like it totally looks like a masculine form of that adjective. In this case, it could be masculine or feminine. Okay, and because marturia is feminine, this adunatas then must be feminine. All right, so a good example of, yeah, how that two-termination adjective, there aren't very many of them, okay, but, yeah, it's good to know these, and especially if you have that alpha as a prefix. Be careful of that. This doesn't mean that anything that begins with an alpha is a two-termination adjective. For example, agathos is a three-termination adjective. Okay? But if you have kind of an adjective that has that alpha as a prefix, and it's kind of the opposite of another adjective, that prefix alpha is saying not something, then it's probably going to be a two-termination adjective, and it falls into this weird category. Okay. So just be aware of those. There aren't very many of them, but they can be confusing when they come up. All right, so that is a discussion of what adjectives have to, how adjectives have to agree with their nouns and or definite articles. Now let's get to specific uses of the adjective. Okay. Every adjective will fall under one of these use categories. All right, these are the three ways that adjectives can be used. The first one is what we call attributive. This is sort of the basic use of the adjective. Okay, it is it's just very simply describing a noun. But the way that you know which one of these uses is in play here with these adjectives is you have to look at the position of the adjective relative to the article and the noun. Okay, so you have to look at the article-noun combination and then look at how the adjective is positioned in that, okay, with relation to that. In the first example there, I have here the adjective is within that article-noun combination. All right, so have a look at this phrase here, he agathe entole. First of all, in order to be an adjective phrase, they must all agree in gender, number, and case. All of these are nominative, they're all singular, and they're all feminine. Therefore, this is an adjective phrase. Everything agrees. And so have a look at this. The article is he. The noun is entole. And agathe is the adjective, and it's positioned in between that article and the noun. If you think of joining the article and the noun is like a little hammock, okay, the agathe is just resting in that hammock, just kind of nice and comfortable there. Okay, if you have that construction, okay, article, adjective, noun, this is an attributive adjective. Be careful of this, though. There is an alternate form of the attributive adjective, and this one looks kind of weird. Okay, the adjective is going to be outside of that article-noun combination. Okay, so again, the article noun is he entole. All right. In this case here, that second example, the agathe is outside of that. Right? You have he entole, he agathe. The agathe is sitting outside of that. However, notice that there is a second article. Okay, and that article, of course, must match up in case, number, gender, all of those good things. And in this case it does. It is identical to the first article there. And so the way that you can think about this is that even though the adjective is outside of that article-noun combination, that second article kind of drags that in, and it associates that with that article and the noun. Okay, and so if you have article, noun, an identical article with an adjective, this is still considered an attributive adjective. Okay, even though the adjective is not in between the article and the noun, that second article still makes it attributive. Again, just think of that second article as dragging that adjective into the article-noun combination. This second alternate form is considered slightly more emphatic. It slightly emphasizes the art. It puts a little bit of an emphasis on that adjective. All right. But really, the translation of either one of these attributive forms, whether it's tucked in between the article and the noun, or you have a second article dragging it into the article noun, the translation of either attributive is the same. Okay, and the way you translate both of these phrases is the good commandment. Okay, it is making a description of the commandment. It's the commandment, but which commandment? It's the good commandment. All right, so have a look at that again. Make sure you can identify an attributive adjective phrase. Okay, and here I've underlined the adjective, which should be helpful to you there. But yeah, just make sure that you understand, where that adjective is in relation to the article and the noun, and what that means for translation. All right, moving on to the second use of this adjective. Okay, when an adjective is there and it agrees with the head noun and any definite article in case, gender, number, but it is sitting outside of that article-noun combination. Okay, whether it is sitting out there before the article and noun or after the article and noun does not make any difference. Okay, just as long as it's outside of the article-noun combination. And so you can see with these examples, the article is ha, the noun is anthropos, and agathos is sitting outside of that. In the first example, it's after the article and the noun. In the second example, it's before the article and the noun, but it is separate from that combination. Okay, it's not within it. And there is no second article kind of dragging it in. When you have that happen, you have a predicate adjective. Okay. Distinct from the attributive, because the attributive must be within or associated with that article and the noun. The predicate, it comes outside of that combination. Okay, with either one of these, both of those examples are both predicate adjectives. And the way that you translate this is a little bit strange. Okay, we don't really have anything like this in English. You have to supply a form of the verb to be. All right, which form of that depends on the subject noun. Okay, if it is, if it's singular, you have to put a singular form of to be. If the noun is plural, put a plural form. Okay, in fact, if the context of the sentence or the passage demands it, this could be a present tense of to be, it could be a past or a future tense of to be. Okay, it's just any form of to be that the context demands and also the singular / plural of the subject also demands. Okay, it has to agree in that. There will not be a form of to be expressed in the Greek. Okay, nowhere you won't find a Greek word that means to be with this, but it is just understood because it's part of that predicate construction. All right, if you have a predicate adjective, that to be is understood. All right, what that also means is that you have a subject with the nominative noun. Then that to be means that there's also a verb. Therefore, this is a complete sentence. Okay, and that's an easy way to tell, okay, how this is being used. If there is a period at the end of this sentence, all right, and it's just an adjective phrase and there's a period there, that means this is a predicate adjective. Okay, if that's just the adjective phrase and nothing else, no other verbs, no other anything, okay, then this is a predicate adjective and the verb is supplied. Okay, so both of those examples, ha anthropos agathos or agathos ha anthropos, both of these are translated with the noun, okay, the person, the man, the human being. Okay, then supply a form of to be, which is why I have this in brackets. All right, that is not in the Greek at all, but you put that in there. The person is, and then the adjective. The person is good. This is different than the attributive adjective. Okay, the attributive adjective is telling you, it's giving you a description of something. Okay, the good man or the good commandment in the example of the last slide. Whereas the predicate adjective is a bit stronger. It's making an assertion about something. Okay, the person or the man is good. All right, so I hope everyone can see that. This phrase could just as easily be the person was good. All right, if the context demands that, you can translate this as a past tense, the person was good. You can translate it as a future tense, the person will be good. All right, or you can translate it as any of the other tenses that we'll be learning over the course of this year. All right, but yeah, the simplest one I just have here, present tense, the person is good. All right, last use of the adjective is called the substantive adjective. Okay, with this one, the adjective is basically being used like a noun, okay, or it's being used as kind of a stand-in for a noun. There is no noun being expressed, so similar to the predicate adjective, okay, the predicate adjective, you supply a word, okay, in English that is not there in Greek. With the substantive, we're going to be doing the same thing. All right. With this one is super easy to identify as well. It must identify in case, gender, number. Okay, but there will not be any noun expressed with it. There won't be any Greek noun with this. Okay, you will only have an article and an adjective, and again, both of those must agree in case, gender, number. Okay. Here is an example. Hoi agathoi. Again, agathoi, you should know this by now. This is an adjective. And hoi is the definite article. Right? They agree. They're both masculine, they're both plural, and they're both nominative. But notice here, this is only article adjective. There's no noun. Okay. Anthropos, lithos, entole. Okay. We don't have a noun there. Therefore, we need to supply a noun. And the way that you do this is you look at the gender and number of either the article or the adjective. All right, it's often easier to get that from the article, okay, because the article has all standard forms. So therefore, look at the article and determine what is the gender and number of that article and adjective, and also context applies here. But look at this phrase here, okay, hoi agathoi. Hoi is masculine and it's plural. So therefore, with the substantive adjective, we can put in the noun men, okay, because of the masculine plural article. You can supply the word men there. It is masculine plural. And so this substantive adjective means the good, but then the good what? Okay, masculine plural, you can put in the good men. If this phrase was feminine plural, hai agathai, you could then put the good women, okay, or girls, okay, changing it to feminine. If this was neuter, okay, ta agatha, you can supply the word things, okay, for neuter plural, the good things. And in fact, that is probably the most common way of expressing the word things. Okay, there is a Greek word for thing, but it's almost never used, because the way that we say the word thing in Greek is just by using the neuter plural, either definite article or some adjective with that. All right, so those are your three uses of the adjective. Once again, first of all, you have the attributive, which is the adjective is in between the article and the noun, or pulled in by a second article. The second one is the predicate adjective, which means that the adjective is sitting outside of the article-noun combination, okay, either before or after, it doesn't matter. And that one you supply a form of to be. And then the third one here, the substantive. No noun given, just an article and the adjective. And you have to supply a noun based on what that gender and number is of the article and or adjective. All right. Yeah, let's look at this now. Getting putting all this together and what does this all mean in a sentence. It's one thing to talk about the theory of it, but what does this actually look like? This will probably be a bit more helpful to you, actually. So let's look at these sentences. These are all part of the assignment. Okay. Number 1, ha agapetas apostolos, didaske ton doulon. In order to do this, you'll have to know the vocabulary, so maybe have a look at the vocabulary list before you do any of these. But the word, let's get all of the forms of the word first. I'll just tell you the word agapetos is in the vocab for this this chapter. It means beloved, beloved. All right, so here are all of the forms of the words. Ha, masculine singular nominative. Then the next word, agapetos, is the adjective, also masculine singular nominative. Apostolos is the noun that goes with those, and it is indeed masculine singular and nominative. Your verb is didaske. There is no sigma at the end of that stem, even though there is a sigma in the word, so be careful of this one. Okay, there is that sigma, but it's part of the verb stem. It's not added onto the end. Therefore, this is a present tense verb, as we learned in chapter 3. The ending there, epsilon iota, didaske, is third person singular. And ton is a definite article. It is masculine singular accusative, and doulon is a noun, a second declension noun, which is masculine singular accusative as well. Okay, so those two, article and noun, go together. Those are all the forms of the words, but there's one more thing that we have to do. We do have an adjective here, the second word, agapetos, and we have to determine how that adjective is being used. All right, is this an attributive adjective? Is it a predicate adjective? Or is it a substantive adjective? Okay. Look at its place in the article and noun. You'll notice that agapetos is in between that article and the noun. They are all masculine singular nominative, so we know that they are all together, which means then that this is a, what? An attributive adjective, right? It is stuck there in between that article and the noun. If you have all the forms of the words, you can write out kind of a rough translation, a sort of translation of each of these words kind of separately. You have the beloved apostle. Didaske is he, she, or it teaches. And then ton is the, and doulon is slave. All right, putting this all together, we're going to take our nominative forms there, the beloved apostle. It is attributive, so that's how we're going to translate it. Okay, the beloved apostle. Use that now as the subject of your verb didaske. So now we can just eliminate he, she, or it. There, we don't need those because we have a subject, the beloved apostle. And so, yeah, the final translation then is the beloved apostle teaches the slave. All right, so there you have that one. Pretty simple, right? All of the words, they come in kind of the exact order of the English sentence. It's just a matter of piecing that out, and hopefully, you have the vocabulary. You haven't forgotten the vocabulary from previous chapters. All right, that's pretty much all that you need to do this sentence. Let's look at the second sentence here, number 2. He ekklesia agathe. All right, the first step here is let's piece out all of the forms of these words. Okay, he is your definite article. It is feminine, singular, and nominative. And actually, each of these words is going to be feminine, singular, nominative. Ekklesia is your noun, and agathe is an adjective. Notice there's no verb here. Okay, just a definite article, a noun, and an adjective. There is a period, though, so that should clue you in onto what this is. Look at that adjective now, agathe, and how it is positioned in this phrase. The article and the noun are he ekklesia, so agathe is outside of that article-noun combination, which makes this a predicate adjective. putting a rough translation on these, just kind of piecing out these words. He is definite article the. Ecclesia is a first declension noun that means church or assembly. And agathe is an adjective that means good. Okay. However, because this is a predicate adjective, when we're doing their final translation, we can supply a form of to be. Present tense is fine with this context, so you have the church is good. A predicate adjective, supply the verb to be. All right, church is singular, therefore, yeah, the church is good. The to be is singular. All right, simple enough, right? If you know what a predicate adjective is and how to translate that, no problem with that sentence. Third sentence, blepusin hoi mathetai tus necrus. Okay, first step, of course, let's get all of our forms of the words. So we're going to work those out. Blepusin is a verb. It means it's the present tense. There is no sigma at the end of that stem. The ending there is a third person plural with the movable nu on it because the next word begins, well, the next word is comprised entirely of a diphthong. All right, next word, hoi, is the article. It is masculine, plural, and nominative, and it goes with mathetai. Mathetai is one of these weird ones. It is a first declension noun, but it is a masculine first declension noun. Therefore, the ending of the article does not match the ending of the noun, but mathetai is indeed masculine. Okay, so it's masculine, plural, nominative. Hoi and mathetai are related. Have a look at the next word or words here. Okay, tus necrus. You see that the ending is the same, and unfortunately these are also agreeing with each other. Tus is the definite article, necrus is an adjective. Each one of them is masculine, plural, and accusative. Okay, so those ones are together. Now the adjective here is necrus in this sentence. How is this adjective being used? All right. Is there a noun that is with this article and adjective? Well, you have a noun, mathetai, but notice that mathetai cannot be associated with necrus because mathetai is masculine, plural, nominative, whereas necrus is masculine, plural, accusative. Okay, so you have two separate elements here. Hoi mathetai go together as the nominatives, and tus necrus go together as the accusatives. Therefore, how is this adjective being used? Okay, you have an article, an adjective, but there's no corresponding noun. Mathetai is not the corresponding noun to necrus. If you are missing a noun, therefore, then you have a substantive adjective. A rough translation of this, blepusin is the word to see. It's from the word see, and the third person plural is they see. Hoi mathetai means the disciples, plural. And then tus necrus. Okay, necrus is from the adjective nekros, which means dead. Think of anything just like necrotic tissue is tissue that has died. Okay, a necropolis is another word for like a graveyard. Okay, a dead city. So yeah, nekros means dead. The dead. And so to translate this, the final translation, use first of all your nominatives as a subject, the disciples. And the disciples are doing the verb. The disciples see. And then what do they see? They see the accusatives, okay, the dead. But it's not just the dead. Okay, notice with your substantive adjective, you need to take the gender and the number. In the case of necrus, that is masculine and plural. Because it is masculine and plural, we can supply the word men. Right? The disciples see the dead men. Okay, and the men is understood, because it's a substantive adjective and the adjective is masculine plural. One more of these practice sentences. Okay, this one is by far the longest one and the most complicated. But if you piece this out, take your time and piece it out slowly. It should be not too difficult. Okay, ha heteros anthropos akue ton logon tu theu en te ecclesia. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to get all of the forms of these words, work these out. Okay, ha is a definite article. It is masculine, singular, and nominative, and everything else is going to follow that. Masculine, singular, nominative. Okay. Heteros is an adjective, and notice it is in between the article and the noun, therefore it is an attributive adjective. All right, that is your adjective phrase there. All right, ha heteros anthropos, article, adjective, noun. Akue is a verb. There is no sigma at the end of the stem, therefore it is a present tense. The ending there, a, is a third person singular ending. Ton logon, ton is the definite article. Logon is a noun. Both of them are masculine, singular, accusative, so those are together. Your next two words are also together. Okay, that is an article-noun combination. Both of them are masculine, singular, genitive. And then your last element of this sentence is a prepositional phrase. Okay, N is a preposition that we learned about in the last chapter. This N is always going to take the dative. Therefore, you have the datives. If you remember from our discussion of the prepositions, the fact that the preposition takes a dative overrides the case function of the dative there. So do not translate this like a dative. This is only the object of the preposition. Okay, so you have preposition, article, noun. Okay, and the article and the noun are both feminine singular dative. They are dative because N only takes its object in the dative. Your rough translation here, kind of a definition of each word. Okay. Ha heteros anthropos, the other person, or the other man, or the other human being. Akue is your verb. He, she, or it hears. It is all third person singular. He, she, or it. Then you have ton logon, the word. Tu theu, the god, or God. And en te ecclesia, in the church. Okay, remember, this is not in to the church. Okay, dative normally would translate to, by, or for, but the N overrides that, and that simply means in the church. All right, those are the definitions of kind of all of the words. When we go to make this a final translation, make the other person, that is the nominative, so let's make that the subject of the verb. The other person hears. Then what do they hear? Direct object, accusative. Here, the other person hears the word. Okay, which word is it? It's the word of God, genitive. Tu theu is genitive, therefore we translate of with that. And it would be appropriate to say of the God here. Okay, but in the context of the New Testament, yeah, the word of God. Proper name God, and then what you're left with is just that prepositional phrase, okay, en te ecclesia. So the other person, nominative, hears the word of God in the church. Okay. So yeah, that is working through a few of these. Please continue to work on the translation assignment with this. And yeah, that'll give you lots more practice with these adjective. Identifying what kind of adjective it is, attributive, predicate, or substantive. And also just learning your forms and which adjectives are associated with the nouns. All right, a bit of a shorter chapter and lesson this time, but we won't have any objection to that, I hope. Keep up the good work, just keep on top of each chapter, and yeah, feel free to contact me if you have any questions. All right. Thank you for being here this week, and I hope you have a good rest of your week. All right. I will see you. Hopefully, I will see each of you on Friday, and we'll just talk about how things are going, and you can ask me questions then and see if you need any help. All right. But other than that, I hope your quarter is going well. You're keeping ahead of everything, and all of the online classes are going okay. All right. Take care, and I will see you again. Bye.